The other sidebar involves the first performance of the Fifth Symphony. One would imagine, or hope, that the premiere performances of Beethoven's new works would have been greatly anticipated and supported in Vienna. And even though his aristocratic patrons continued to support him financially, Beethoven still had to fight it out with the petty bureaucrats and the authorities in order to schedule a major concert in a large public theater. And as usual, Beethoven also had to act as his own producer in organizing one of these Academy concerts. And since they occurred only once every few years, there was plenty of new music to present to the public. Beethoven was finally granted the use of the popular Theater an der Wien for the evening of Thursday, December 22nd, 1808, 3 days before Christmas, when the theater was unoccupied and unheated. And that's as much as they would give him.
Well, it's really quite inspiring when you think about it, isn't it?
Right. Aren't you all surprised by how that was presented? What it took to present those incredible masterpieces, which are known to practically entire world now, when they were just written. And I'm really appreciative of Lawrence Rapchak, including these facts of the first premiere of those works into his narration about the symphony. A lot of times musicologists seem to shy away from this kind of information because, it's not technically relevant to the structure of the symphony, right? But it's very relevant, in my opinion, to understanding Beethoven as a person, and therefore understanding it more profoundly, Beethoven's music as what it is and what it meant and what he was communicating. Everyone is aware of the fact that Beethoven was very much into the theme of struggle and challenges and overcoming challenges, and even the symphony, as we'll see further down, has that theme, that topic explored and stated in certain terms by Beethoven in his last movement. But anyway, what life circumstances led to Beethoven's aesthetics and his approach to the structure, his approach to the storytelling, and especially what he did, how he responded, how he handled his own creative process, but not only how he handled presenting and pushing forward his music when it was newly composed and not easily accepted, and of course not easily accepted. All new music is not going to be easily accepted. It's a given fact. But what Beethoven did and how he spent his time and effort in publicizing and letting people know about what his music is, and that is very relevant to understanding his musical stories and his music. And this is also very, to me at least, very relevant to answering the question, how and why was he such a genius?
Beethoven also organized the orchestra and the chorus, which he conducted. He was a notoriously erratic conductor. The music was all brand new. The player's music was freshly copied and filled with mistakes, and there was approximately 4 hours playing time of music to be rehearsed in a very short time. Believe me, this is a recipe for disaster, especially with an audience sitting in a dark, freezing theater.
There's a tendency for young musicians or of all sorts to feel like, at least in the public eye, that things are given to them on a sort of a silver platter. Things should just be given to me. It's not so much the entitlement, but maybe the way in which we see other people's careers rise. We feel like, I just have to be a replacement for them when someone falls sick, and then I'll have a career. Or I'll just need to, win this competition, and then I'll have the best career of my life. I just need to win this job. Or I just need to, study with this composer in order for me to have my works premiered, and they'll connect me with all the great people. And I think especially with, Leonard Bernstein's biopic coming out, especially when we look at what Larry has to say about Beethoven and these great composers, great icons, great musicians, I think it's a lot of behind the scenes, difficult, challenging work that puts all of this together. It's likened now to a great composer of our day hiring out the Stern Auditorium of the Carnegie Hall and just having, 2-3 hours of their own music played and conducted, and he's soloing and he's doing all of that. I don't see anyone doing that unless they were given that opportunity because some wealthy donor was going to pay for it.
Well, speaking of wealthy donors, where do
Yeah.
those appear from? They don't appear
Right.
from thin air. So Beethoven was a very diligent networker, and he did all and everything that it takes for his music to be presented. Now,
Yeah.
you're right about likening this concert to hiring a Stern Auditorium at the Carnegie Hall, hiring the orchestra, hiring the choir,
Yeah.
conducting all of it, copying, by the way, all the parts by hand, or hiring
Yes.
someone to copy that. And
Yeah.
on top of it, publicizing, inviting the audience, and making sure they're locked in and actually listen to the end of the concert.
Yeah.
Minus the heat. So plus
Totally,
the
totally.
cold. And
Yeah.
also Beethoven went through extraordinary lengths of applying for grants and sponsorships, and very often than not he was turned down. Now can you imagine someone with less resilience than this man getting turned down and not getting the Stern Auditorium because, well, what the heck you're going to present there? Some new concert
Yeah.
or new music? Who cares about new music? All of that stuff. Being turned down and not giving up and still doing it on top of composing. It's very natural for the person to say, well, I'm a composer. I need to dedicate my time to composing. All this organizational, managerial stuff should be done by someone else. But what if it doesn't get done by someone else? And Beethoven, of all people, was probably one of the most entitled to all the managerial stuff to be done.
Oh, he had the
around
gift,
him,
he had the
for
talent.
him,
He studied with
given to him.
Haydn. Yeah. He had
just
all
like
the makings.
Yeah, just like Lauren says, what would we all give today to be sitting in that cold theater and be present in the first performance of Beethoven's Fourth Concerto, played by Beethoven himself?
So this mammoth concert began at 6:30 p.m. and it included, first, an aria for soprano and orchestra, A Perfido, 3 movements from the lovely Mass in C major with soloists and chorus, a lengthy solo piano improvisation by Mr. Beethoven, the brand new choral fantasy for all the performing forces as a finale. Now, wouldn't that be enough for one evening in a cold theater? Well, the concert also included the world premiere performances of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, his Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral, and the Fourth Piano Concerto with the composer as soloist, all on the same program. And somehow it all happened. It is almost impossible to imagine what the audience experienced that night. The surviving eyewitness accounts were as supportive as they could be, but the magnitude, the historical significance of that legendary night cannot be overestimated. And as massive a pain in the neck as it was for everyone to sit through this thing, what would any of us give to go back in time and freeze along with that audience and hear what took place on the evening of December 22nd, 1808.
Don't forget, I think at least this point in his life, he was probably suffering very much from his lack of hearing. That he
And no
wasn't,
hearing aids.
yeah, he wasn't going to be able to fully experience what was going on. I think the sheer thing that probably drove him through it all was will, this determination, this idea that no, this is going to happen. Whether I'm deaf or not, whether I'm able to conduct or otherwise, whether I have a chorus or a good piano. I wonder what kind of piano he played that evening for the premiere of the...
Was it tuned?
Yeah, was it tuned? Was it a Steinway D that's been worked on meticulously by a technician? What was it? What are the circumstances that we don't know that drove this to come? And look at the program. Do you see any other organizational orchestra putting on a program like this today? It's impossible.
How much did he have to pay the musicians to play this much of
Yeah.
new music, which they've never seen? And of course, there's so much resistance against new music, and it's historic. It's always,
Yeah.
it's not only today, it was in Beethoven's time. Oh, you're giving me this stack of sheet music to
Yeah.
play tomorrow? And,
But he must have believed in his music so much, because if you hear the Pastoral Symphony now and then the Fifth Symphony now, the contrast, but also the brilliance of both pieces. And then the Fourth Piano Concerto, which is arguably one of the most enlightened pieces of music he wrote. Then we have the Choral Fantasy. This is just blockbuster after blockbuster. And he didn't spread it out through many days. He just said, sit down and let me show you what I have to offer.
Now, back to the scherzo. The rambunctious trio has disintegrated, and we slide back into the shadowy, mysterious return of the scherzo. However, Beethoven continues to innovate now. He continues to write musical history in the form of this Fifth Symphony, because instead of a literal repeat of the scherzo from the top after the trio, Beethoven now reimagines all of it. And in doing so, he creates a totally creepy skeletal version of it. The powerful horn march now becomes this. It's spectral. Did you hear those fleeting, wispy sounds in the violins and violas? Very difficult to execute, especially for a full section of players. And it's impossible to overestimate the effect this passage would have on German Romanticism of the era, especially the rise of Gothic supernatural literature, poetry, opera, and the overwrought imagination of French composer Hector Berlioz, whose Symphonie Fantastique would rely heavily on this music for inspiration. And Beethoven's novel extension of the scherzo, which we heard before the trio, is now reduced to a mere outline, a desolate landscape of pizzicato strings and haunting nature sounds from the woodwinds.
I also like how Larry was like, this is the quote. He kind of anticipates what's going to happen, and he says the entire audience was seized by a spasm of nervous excitement, and not until it subsided were the players able to be heard. Can you imagine being in a concert where everyone is so uproarious and seized by their own emotions within the concert that you can't even hear the players, And this is something, like, an audience experience that I don't think we hear as often. Maybe in some jazz concerts where that might happen, where audiences are allowed to sort of speak or talk to one another. But in a classical music concert, like, to have this sort of atmosphere, that must have been incredible.
Well, it used to be that the audience was very much more part of the experience and expressing the emotions and participating in the music. It's just in the course of the past century, the regimen of concert going became so stabilized, I want to say even rigid. You have to follow very prescribed way of behaving at a concert, and any deviation from it is perceived as lack of being cultured. But it wasn't always so. And in Beethoven's time, the way audience interacted with the music, especially with the new music, was a lot more free and welcoming for the audience to express, to get out of the seat and, say things and gesture and be part of it. Very much like today's pop or rock concert, I would even say. And Beethoven's music was written in such dramatic ways, and he also incorporated so much of newly incoming instrumentation. I mean, he included so much brass in there and percussion and all of that. Probably, I mean, I can't speak for two centuries ago, but probably the parallel of going to Beethoven's symphony being presented at a concert is less of a classical music concert experience of today and more of a rock band experience, don't you think?
Well, I mean, first of all, as we mentioned in the last episode, it was premiered among so many different pieces, and so I don't know how long is a rock concert, but also I think what's interesting is that it speaks to the kind of world of when the music was premiered, and I think Beethoven understood music in a way that was obviously incredible, but he also understood the audience. He also understood what was important to transmit to an audience. I think it's probably evident to him that certain pieces that are premiered just don't do anything for the audience, and some pieces did a lot. And so he, maybe thanks to Haydn as well, with the way that Haydn also interacts with his audience within the music, I think he understood that there are certain things, certain ways to compose, certain ways to surprise the audience. And you look at the way filmmakers are trying to use that. You feel like there's a certain dialogue or there's certain scenes that, okay, that seems normal, and suddenly there's something that totally catches you off guard. And I think this is sort of why these, I guess, whether it's filmmakers or composers are called masters or the greats, is because they know how to tell a story, or they know how to lure you on and then surprise you.
And now we encounter what many consider to be Beethoven's absolute masterstroke of innovation in this symphony. Not long after Beethoven's death, Hector Berlioz described this upcoming passage and its effect on an audience in Paris. He said, quote, "At that moment when the orchestra seems to be taking us from a subterranean cave to a temple of the sun, the shouts of acclamation, the cries of hush, shh, the clapping, the convulsive laughter exploded with such force that the orchestra was buried beneath the torrent of enthusiasm and disappeared completely. The entire audience was seized by a spasm of nervous excitement, and not till it subsided were the players able to be heard." And here's what he was describing. Beethoven's signature rhythmic motive is dying away in a pathetic whimper in the bassoon. It's now taken up by the timpani on the note C, the tonic note. As the music settles into this unearthly calm, and below, the cello and bass sustain an A flat. And talk about architecture in music. The symphonic model was 4 separate movements, each movement a complete entity unto itself, until now, as Beethoven's creative powers began to reach their height. And the ghostly scherzo gradually, organically evolves, a bridge directly into the blazing glory of the finale. And the reputation of this symphony as an embodiment of darkness to light is based primarily on this dramatic, groundbreaking transition, as the timpani softly sound the motive, and the scherzo theme begins to rise in the first violins, but minus its first and last notes, like so. And Beethoven extracts those last 3 notes, and he repeats them. The timpani now increase its pattern into continuous quarter notes on C. And the cello and bass leave their long A flat, and they begin a rhythmic pattern of their own that revolves around the note G. G, G. While above this, the fragment of melody in the violins also revolves around G, like so. G, G. So they're both, the cello and bass down below and the violins above, are both involved in a figure here that is rotating, that is circulating around the note G, like so. And it interlocks rhythmically. Let me play it slowly. For this very brief moment, Beethoven has captured something of the profound nature of music as it exists in time and space, the physical interaction of levels of sound and their gradual alignment. And the second that the timpani and the basses lock into the same rhythmic pattern, softly, softly, at that very moment, the first violin's fragments begin to stabilize, and they become a continuous flow now, with the intervals of the motive expanding upwards, like so. Here's a minor sixth, a major sixth, a seventh, a higher seventh, an octave, a higher octave, a higher octave, until we reach this wide open elemental chord, this amazing progression from darkness to light, often imitated, never equaled in the history of music. Here it is.
I've heard the symphony before, but to have it described like that really adds an extra dimension of my understanding.
Absolutely takes you much deeper in the depth of understanding of what it means and how it's created, how it's constructed. The
Yeah.
architecture, I think, is a key word in here. Beethoven was very much an architect of his music, and so much thought. When you just listen to that piece, to that symphony, you just follow it emotionally. And of course, we have a very simple explanation. Why is it so engaging? Well, because Beethoven is a genius.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to be genius? Beethoven didn't write this kind of symphony while in diapers. It took him years and years of developing this kind of insight into levels of the sounds, into the structures, the rhythms, and how to put it all together so it communicates in such an extraordinary, powerful way. Just like Larry Rapchak said that this particular transition from darkness to light had been imitated by many composers, but never equaled.
Yeah. I love how there's two things he highlights, right? Obviously, there's that amazing transition from darkness to light. He talks a lot about how he uses techniques compositionally, whether it's the bass line or how it moves and different motifs. But the other thing that he talks about is this haunting nature of instrumentation, which has influenced other composers like Hector Berlioz, and these sort of the way he uses pizzicato, the kind of way he uses the woodwinds, and it provides such a romantic feeling of solitary solitude within nature, like the lone tree or the abbey within the oak trees that
Exactly. And our team created those images to accompany that explanation. I think it absolutely brilliant. You see those skeletons, almost like haunting, Halloweenish pictures in there. And of course, before you can transition to light, you got to create the actual darkness. And the way Beethoven creates it, you would think darkness, okay, let's use brass in the lower registers. No, he just deprives the music of all the other colors other than snippets of the sound, really spaced in different ranges. And it's just an incredible emotional impact of deprivation. So what is darkness? Darkness doesn't necessarily mean pressure. It can mean deprivation. And by really making it very skeletal sound. And I like how Larry makes the parallel with Gothic and maybe even goth, like today's style of it. And interestingly, the colors also in the film, the way our producers created it and the filmmakers created it, how the colors play out. When the darkness is created, it's not all black, but it's in that color scheme and color spectrum of really almost feels like the whole life is sucked out of the music and the visual of it.
No matter where you are or who you are, music connects us all. We started with a dream, but now we are paving the future. Welcome to the Sound Expressiva Global Competition. Fully virtual, yet bringing musicians closer together than ever before, now on a global scale. True live, inclusivity, diversity, connection, community, an extraordinary array of judges. Get noticed by companies all over the world. Prizes, scholarships, performance opportunities. Apply to be a part of the most exciting congregation of artists, like nothing you've ever seen before. We guarantee quality and leave no musician behind. We can't wait to hear you on the virtual stage.